Space was never silent, at least, not to those who knew how to listen. Beneath the static hum of the void, beneath the radiation hiss and the faint whisper of particle storms, there were always patterns. Rhythms. Voices, if one had the right kind of imagination. And on the edge of the Orion expanse, the most forbidden sector in all charted space, those whispers carried secrets older than Earth itself. It was just past 0300 hours aboard the USS Harrington, a mid-range reconnaissance vessel tasked with running perimeter sweeps around the expanse. Most nights, if nights could even exist out here, it was routine. Empty. The kind of duty handed to crews who were either too unlucky to avoid it, or too stubborn to refuse. Lieutenant Commander Mark Ellison had long ago stopped believing in luck. He sat in the dim glow of the ops deck, coffee cooling in his hand, his eyes half-closed as the scanners murmured their endless stream of data. To anyone else, it was white noise. To him, after 9 years of long-range patrols, it was music, predictable, monotonous, and safe. Until the rhythm changed. "Commander?" The voice of Dr. Rachel Moore, the ship's science officer, cracked through the haze. She was leaning over her console, a frown carved across her pale features. "I'm picking up something. Inbound frequency. It's faint, but it's real." Ellison sat up, setting the mug aside. "From the expanse?" She didn't answer at first. Instead, her fingers danced over the sensor array, amplifying, cleaning the signal, drawing it out of the storm of background radiation. Then she looked at him, eyes sharp with disbelief. "It's not alien," she whispered. Her voice was low, but it carried across the deck like a gunshot. "It's human." For a moment, the ops deck went still. The only sound was the thrum of the ship's engines, vibrating through the bulkheads. "That's not possible," said Captain David Grant, stepping down from the observation platform. The man was carved from stone, square shoulders, gray hair cropped close, the kind of officer who had stared down more wars than his crew had lived through. "There are no sanctioned ships inside the expanse. Not Earth, not colonies. No one." Rachel adjusted the frequency again, and the sound grew clearer, an emergency transponder, cycling endlessly on repeat. The code was unmistakable, Terran Navy designation. Ellison felt his stomach twist. "That's an S-class distress beacon," he said. "Deep-range battleship, pre-expansion era." But those ships were decommissioned a century ago. Then explain how one's broadcasting from the dead center of the expanse. The captain's words cut the silence like a blade. No one wanted to go there. Not even the most daring of scavengers or smugglers. The Forbidden Zone wasn't simply a designation on the maps, it was a graveyard. Every ship that had ever entered, Terran or otherwise, had vanished. No wreckage. No signals. Nothing. Just silence. And now, suddenly, there was a voice calling out from within. A human voice. "Put it on main," Grant ordered. The deck lights dimmed as the forward holodisplay activated, the transmission spilling across the air in garbled fragments. Static roared, then cut into a voice, male, strained, desperate, repeating the same line over and over again. "This is the USS Roanoke, emergency distress, all systems compromised, any Terran ship, please respond." Rachel's hand trembled against her console. "The Roanoke," she said. "That ship was lost in 2147. It was one of the first deep space warships ever to attempt to jump beyond the expanse. It never came back. Until now." The captain's voice was low, steady, but Ellison caught the faintest crack beneath it. They were staring at a ghost. The crew gathered in the wardroom an hour later. The captain didn't waste time. "You've all heard the transmission. You know the history. Official protocol says we flag it, log it, and move on. The expanse is restricted for a reason." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across them. "But this isn't just noise. It's a Terran ship, and by the looks of it, survivors. If even one of our own is still alive in there, we have an obligation." Ellison leaned forward, tension tightening his jaw. "With respect, Captain, no one's come out of that sector alive. Ever. If we cross that line, we might not either." Rachel's eyes burned with something sharper than fear, curiosity, maybe obsession. But if the Roanoke is still intact, if it's really there, it means the expanse isn't what we think it is. That ship could hold answers. The room was divided. The helmsman, Eric Johnson, shifted uneasily. The medic, Dr. Sarah Blake, chewed her lip, saying nothing. Fear and duty pulled against each other like gravity wells. Grant ended it with one simple line. "We're going in." Crossing into the expanse was like stepping into another universe. The moment the Harrington's prow cut the invisible boundary, the stars outside the viewports warped. They didn't vanish, not exactly. They bent, twisted, elongated into spirals of light that curved against all sense of physics. The NAV systems went wild, throwing out error codes faster than the computers could process. The air seemed heavier. Breathing itself became work. Ellison gripped the armrests of his chair as Rachel scrambled to stabilize the sensors. I can't even categorize half of what I'm reading," she muttered. Space-time curvature is off the charts. Gravity waves spiking in random wait there. She froze the display. And through the distortion, like a mirage rising from a desert horizon, a ship appeared. At first glance, it was enormous. Darkened hull, scorched plating, jagged scars carved deep into its sides. The registry code along its flank was faded, but unmistakable, USS Roanoke. The distress beacon pulsed steadily from its shattered comms array. The bridge went silent. No one spoke. Because what they were staring at didn't make sense. The Roanoke looked wrong. Its design matched Terran schematics from a century ago, but its angles, its plating, its structure, all of it seemed subtly, disturbingly altered. Twisted in ways that suggested the ship had grown, evolved, as if the void itself had reshaped it. Allison's chest tightened. That's not just a derelict. That ship's alive. As if on cue, the Roanoke's lights flickered. One by one, across its colossal frame, the windows ignited with a dim, ghostly glow. And then, through the static, the transmission changed. Not the automated distress beacon. A voice. Clear. Human. USS Harrington, we see you. The bridge of the Harrington was suffocatingly still. No one dared breathe, as though the sound alone might break the fragile line between sanity and madness. The Roanoke drifted before them, scarred yet whole, as though it had clawed its way out of a century-long grave. Its faint glow pulsed like a dying heart, synchronized with the unnatural rhythms of the void around it. And then came the voice. Smooth. Calm. Human. USS Harrington, we see you. Ellison's blood turned to ice. He tore his eyes from the viewports and looked to Captain Grant, but the older man's face betrayed nothing, only that soldier's mask he wore when fear would otherwise creep in. Open a channel, Grant ordered. His voice was steady, but his hand tightened slightly around the edge of the console. Rachel hesitated. Sir, if that's really them, if it's really human. Do it. Static hissed. The ship's comms crackled alive. This is Captain David Grant of the USS Harrington. Identify yourself. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable. Then, the reply came. This is Captain Aaron Whitaker, commanding officer of the USS Roanoke. The name hit Ellison like a fist. Whitaker had been a legend in naval history, a pioneer, a man whose name was etched into academy lectures. But he'd vanished with the Roanoke more than 100 years ago. His bones should have been dust. Impossible, Ellison muttered under his breath. But the voice persisted. Calm. Familiar. Alive. We request immediate assistance. Systems critical. Crew compromised. We need evacuation. Rachel's hand trembled as she muttered, Sir, if this is real, if that's really Captain Whitaker, then he should be over 160 years old. Grant stared at the glowing hulk in the distance. Then he gave the order no one wanted to hear. Prepare a boarding party. The shuttle ride was silent. Ellison sat strapped into his harness, rifle across his lap, his pulse hammering in his throat. Beside him, Rachel checked her datapad, her eyes flaring with scientific hunger even as fear shadowed her face. Eric Johnson manned the shuttle controls, jaw clenched tight, while Dr. Sarah Blake quietly recited oxygen stability checks under her breath. They were four souls diving into a nightmare. As the shuttle locked onto the Roanoke's outer docking ring, the hull loomed like a sleeping beast. Up close, the scars were worse gouges that ran too deep to be natural, plating that seemed to have melted, then cooled into grotesque new shapes. The ship wasn't just damaged, it had been altered. Docking complete, Johnson muttered. His voice cracked. The airlock cycled with a groan that echoed like the moan of some ancient thing. The inner hatch released, and a waft of stale, cold air spilled into the shuttle. It smelled faintly of rust. And something else. Something organic. Ellison's stomach churned. He powered up his rifle. Let's move. The corridors of the Roanoke were a tomb. Their helmet lights carved narrow beams across walls blackened with soot and strange, vein-like markings that spiderwebbed through the metal. Every step sent echoes rolling into the distance, as though the ship itself were listening. Rachel crouched beside one wall, brushing gloved fingers across the markings. "This isn't corrosion," she whispered. "It's grown. The alloy's molecular structure has changed. Like it's been rewritten." "Rewritten by what?" Ellison muttered. She didn't answer. As they pushed deeper, their comms crackled with phantom whispers, half-formed words, fragments of voices that weren't theirs. Johnson swore under his breath, smacking his helmet as though to drive the noise away. Finally, they reached the bridge. The doors slid open with a reluctant hiss, revealing a chamber frozen in time. Control consoles flickered with faint light, their interfaces warped with static. Chairs were overturned, panels torn free, the remnants of a battle long ago. And in the captain's chair sat a man. He rose slowly as their lights fell upon him. His uniform was Terran navy black, faded and tattered. His hair was white, but his posture was strong, his eyes sharp. "Captain Whitaker," Grant's voice came over the comm from the Harrington, distant but commanding. "Is it truly you?" The man inclined his head, his lips curving into something that might have been a smile. "I am Aaron Whitaker." Ellison's hands tightened on his rifle. Something in the man's voice was wrong. It was steady, too steady, like it had been practiced 1,000 times. Rachel stepped forward, unable to contain herself. "How have you survived? This ship vanished more than a century ago." Whitaker's eyes gleamed. "Time is different here. The void preserves. The void provides." The way he said it, like scripture, made Ellison's skin crawl. "Where's the rest of your crew?" Sarah asked softly. Whitaker's smile widened, though it never reached his eyes. "They're here. They've adapted." As if on cue, a sound rose from the corridors behind them. A scraping, dragging noise, like claws across steel. Then another. And another. Ellison swung his rifle toward the shadows. His heart slammed against his ribs. Shapes emerged. Once human. Now twisted. Their uniforms hung in tatters, their skin stretched and mottled, eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural sheen. Their movements were jerky, twitching, as though pulled on strings. Rachel gasped, stumbling backward. "Oh my God." Whitaker spread his arms as though welcoming old friends. "The void takes, but it also gives. It reshapes us. Makes us stronger. They are not lost. They are eternal." The creatures shuffled closer, their mouths opening in silent moans. Ellison snapped his rifle up. "Captain, we have hostiles." Grant's voice cut sharp over comms. "Get out of there, now." But Whitaker's eyes locked onto Ellison, gleaming with something alien. "You don't understand," he said calmly. "You're not here to rescue us. You're here to join us." The creatures lunged. Ellison opened fire. Muzzle flashes lit the bridge, the sound deafening in the confined space. Figures dropped, but more poured in through the ruined doors, their inhuman persistence unstoppable. "Fall back!" Ellison shouted. Rachel screamed as one of the twisted crew lunged for her, its fingers like hooked talons. Johnson tackled it aside, slamming his sidearm against its temple, but the thing barely flinched. Sarah dragged Rachel toward the exit, tears streaking down her face inside her helmet. Ellison fired again, cutting a path through the onslaught. Move, move, move. Whitaker's voice rose behind them, calm, almost tender. You can't escape the void. It already sees you. It already knows you. They barreled into the corridor, creatures shrieking in pursuit, their howls echoing like the cries of the damned. The Roanoke was awake. And it wanted them. The corridor shook with the stampede of inhuman feet. Ellison's lungs burned as he drove the team forward, rifle kicking against his shoulder, muzzle flashes tearing the shadows apart. The twisted crew surged after them, shrieking in voices that scraped against the edge of sanity. Airlocks ahead! Johnson shouted, his breath ragged. Rachel stumbled, clutching her datapad as though it were her lifeline. Sarah dragged her upright, her voice trembling through the comms, keep moving. Don't look back. But Ellison did look back. He couldn't help it. And there, framed by the swarm of horrors, strode Captain Whitaker. Calm. Unharmed. His pale eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and his voice carried like a hymn. You can't run from what you've already become. Ellison's skin crawled. He snapped a burst of fire into the advancing mass, forcing them back long enough for the group to burst into the docking bay. The shuttle sat waiting, its hatch open like a promise of salvation. Go! Ellison barked, pivoting to cover the retreat. Johnson and Sarah half-dragged Rachel into the craft, her eyes wide and wild with a terror that bordered on awe. Then the shadows fell across him. Whitaker stepped into the bay, the horrors circling at his heels. He raised his hand, not as an attack, but as an invitation. You feel it, don't you? He said softly. The void whispering in your mind. It's already inside you. Ellison's finger tightened on the trigger, then froze. Because, for a heartbeat, he did hear it. A murmur at the edge of thought. Familiar. Tempting. Promising answers to questions humanity had never dared to ask. Mark! Sarah's voice screamed through comms. Get in the shuttle. The spell broke. Ellison unleashed a final burst, forcing Whitaker back, then dove inside the shuttle. Johnson slammed the hatch closed, and the docking clamps released with a violent shudder. The shuttle tore free from the Roanoke. Get us the hell out of here! Ellison gasped. Johnson's hands blurred across the controls, engines roaring. The shuttle sped into the warped starfield of the Forbidden Zone, the Roanoke shrinking in the distance. But they weren't alone. The twisted crew poured from its launch bays in grotesque mockeries of shuttles, hulks of metal fused with living flesh, wings that pulsed like muscle. They moved with predatory grace, cutting across the void toward their fleeing prey. Multiple contacts. Rachel cried. Her voice was shaking, but her eyes burned with obsession. Do you see it? Do you see what the void has done? It's not just corrupting them, it's evolving them. Not the time, Doc. Ellison snapped. He gripped his rifle, useless against the oncoming storm. The creatures closed in, their distorted craft shrieking across the comms with frequencies that clawed at their skulls. The shuttle shuddered under impact as one latched onto its hull. Sparks burst across the controls. We can't outrun them! Johnson yelled. Ellison's gut twisted. Then we fight. He ripped open the access hatch, exposing the void beyond. The emergency shield shimmered, holding back the vacuum, but thin enough to allow fire. He braced himself, aimed into the darkness, and unleashed hell. Bolts tore through the parasite clinging to their hull. It screeched, a sound that wasn't mechanical, wasn't human, but something in between. It writhed, then burst apart, chunks of fused flesh and metal scattering into the void. But more were coming. Mark! Sarah screamed. She pointed past him, her eyes wide. The Roanoke. It was moving. Not drifting, moving. The impossible hulk was stirring, its colossal frame shifting like an ancient leviathan waking from slumber. The warped plating along its sides rippled, opening like gills, revealing glowing veins of light that pulsed in rhythm with its heartbeat. The Roanoke wasn't a ship anymore. It was alive. And it wanted them back. "Brace for jump!" Johnson shouted, punching coordinates into the NAV system. Rachel grabbed his wrist. "No! You don't understand, the void doesn't let go. If we try to jump inside it, we'll be torn apart. Better torn apart than turned into one of them." Sarah snapped. Ellison's mind raced. They were trapped between death and something worse. And then, as if the void itself were listening, a thought slipped into his head. A whisper. The Harrington. The main ship. Their only chance. "Johnson, set course for the Harrington." Ellison barked. The shuttle screamed through the warped stars, the horrors trailing close behind. The Roanoke followed, its colossal bulk bending the very fabric of space around it. On the Harrington, Captain Grant stood at the forward display, his jaw set. He'd heard everything. Seen everything. "Arm all weapons," he ordered. "But sir," the tactical officer began. "Do it!" Grant roared. "That thing wearing Whitaker's face is not human anymore. And I'll be damned if I let it take my crew." The Harrington's cannons powered up, their glow cutting against the darkness like beacons of defiance. The shuttle docked hard, slamming into the bay. Ellison and the others spilled out, gasping for breath. The ship trembled beneath their feet as the Roanoke closed in. "Seal the bay." Grant's voice thundered over the calm. Bulkheads crashed down, locking the shuttle behind them. Ellison staggered onto the bridge, armor scorched, eyes blazing. "Captain, we can't outrun it. It's alive. It's part of this place." Grant's gaze met his, steady and grim. "Then we kill it." The Roanoke loomed outside the viewports, its glowing veins pulsing brighter, as though it were laughing at them. Smaller twisted shuttles swarmed around it, battering against the Harrington's shields. "Fire!" Grant commanded. The void erupted in light. Missiles tore from their launch bays, energy beams slashed through the darkness, shredding the abominations that swarmed around them. The Roanoke roared, a sound that wasn't sound at all but a vibration deep in their bones. Its hull split open, revealing a cavernous maw of light and shadow, pulling everything toward it. "It's trying to consume us!" Rachel cried. Ellison felt the pull, the whisper in his skull growing louder. "Join us. Become eternal." He clenched his jaw, fury boiling inside him. "Not today." Grant looked at him. One soldier to another. The decision was silent but understood. "Ready the drive core," Grant ordered. Ellison's heart stopped. "Sir, that'll overload the entire ship." Grant nodded once. "Better we end here on our terms, than theirs." And then they went to work. The core overloaded. The hum built into a scream. Grant's voice rang out, calm, unshakable. "For Earth. For humanity." The void erupted. Light consumed everything. And then, nothing. When Ellison opened his eyes, he was floating. Silence pressed against him. The cold vacuum stretched in all directions. He realized, dimly, that he was inside an escape pod. The pod's systems blinked faintly, life support barely functional. Sarah floated beside him, unconscious but alive. Rachel and Johnson were gone. And outside the viewport, the expanse was empty. The Roanoke was gone. The Harrington was gone. No light. No monsters. Only silence. For a moment, Ellison thought they'd won. That the sacrifice had worked. And then he heard it. A whisper. Soft. Familiar. "USS Harrington, we see you." Ellison's blood froze. He turned his gaze outward. And there, far in the distance, where the warped stars twisted into impossible spirals, a faint light flickered. Growing brighter. Closer.
The Roanoke was not gone. It never would be.